Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Football.
And that's right, Purple Access. It's Zulgad, it's Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist Ross Brendel, who is now our full-time producer of this show, which is yet to win awards, but that's beside the point.
Chipper, yeah, that's my line.
Yeah, good point. Chipper, first of all, if people have not seen your Sunday story in the Star Tribune, which has nothing to do with football, they should. It's one of the best things I've seen. And let me say this, if that is not in the book, Greatest American Sports, Writing for the Year 2023/4, I don't know what will be. Congratulations. You have, again, knocked a huge takeout story out of the park, and I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Worked on it for several months, and I hope people go read and learn about Chloe Johnson. If you haven't read it, just Google Chloe Johnson. And I'm proud of her and her family and grateful that they allowed me into their lives to share her story.
Inspirational stuff. All right, on to football. What have you learned in watching the playoffs, including what was, for the most part, a magnificent divisional round? What have you learned about the Vikings when you sort of extrapolate what you've seen? What comes to mind as far as things that the Vikings need to improve, that you think the Vikings might be on par with in some cases? What's your takeaway so far from what you've watched in the playoffs this past weekend, especially, and how it relates to the Purple?
Yeah, I it's funny because everything revolves around quarterback, right? So we'll start there. And it's really across the board. When you look at the teams in the playoffs, you have the Mahomes and Josh Allen, and that game, the quarterback play in that game was just off the charts. And the fact that it reminded us how great Patrick Mahomes is to get that team to the AFC Championship game with all the issues that they've had at wide receiver. It speaks to his brilliance. But then you have, and we could talk about Jordan Love and the interception that looked eerily familiar. Eerily. I think I was sitting next to you the last time I saw that pass.
You did. You were. And the side by side of that. Oh my God.
Judd, it was identical.
It was.
You saw it on Twitter, right?
Yes, the side by side.
Yeah. But I thought you take away that and the way he played in the playoffs, but then you have Baker Mayfield, and he had a bad interception at the end, and Jared Goff. How can you not feel about Jared Goff? So I don't think we can draw a line through this yet, right? Through the quarterback. You got to have Mahomes, or you got to have, you can't win with a first-year quarterback or a journeyman, stopgap, bridge, whatever you want to call them. You can't do that. So I go back to trenches, line play.
Yep.
I look at the way the Detroit Lions are set up right now, and we can talk about their offense and Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. But to me, that the heartbeat of that team is that offensive line, the defensive line. They have issues in the secondary, I think, but they're built from inside out, right? And I think the Niners are the same way. The Chiefs' defensive line can be that they didn't play well in the first half the other day against Buffalo, but they have. But to me, it solidifies that Kwesi has a lot of work to do to solidify both lines. I think you have to start there. I don't know how you do it when you're trying to re-sign Justin Jefferson to massive contract and Kirk Cousins and all that, but I don't think you can lose sight of, I think the teams that win at the highest level win in the trenches, or you have a Patrick Mahomes or a quarterback that's just so superior they can cover up a number of flaws.
The Lions offensive line I absolutely love. I love guys like that. Now so let's take what you said and narrow it down a bit more. Yeah. Because the Vikings are in very good shape at tackle. Like, the Vikings have two very solid, good, and that's hard to find. Congratulations. That's great. But let's talk about in the trenches. Let's talk about the interior, because this is where I think that the difference is. And I'm not saying that Reisner was awful, because he was not. And Ingram might not have been great, but he was improved. And Bradbury, for the most part, he has certainly improved. All of that being said, Chipper, those big guys inside, when they can just kick your ass, like when a team says, "Oh my God, we got to go up against those two guards and center all game." And I'll go back to and look, I'm a broken record on this, but I think it's relevant. What Brad Childress did when he brought in Steve Hutchinson on what was then considered a ridiculous contract chip, but we covered that guy. Teams feared him. He made McKinney better. That's where I think, and I've been urging the Vikings to do this for like 5 years, so it probably won't take place. But that's where I want at least one ass kicker at either guard or center.
Yeah, and I think about this. I'm writing a column on Frank Ragnow, who's Chanhasen's own, the All-Pro center for Detroit, who's just as tough as individuals you're going to meet.
Yep.
Judd, 4th and goal from the 1 yard line, 10-10, third quarter. Ragnow's beat the heckin' back. I mean, he's got an assortment of injuries a mile long. But what did they do? They ran right up behind him, even though he's going against the Buccaneers' 350-pound nose tackle, because they trusted their center, and he got it done. I forgot the name of the running back. Wasn't the running back, but the wide receiver they gave to. He goes in, one scores, they go up 17-10. You need to have that difference maker inside. And they have them at tackles, like you said, but they just don't have them in the interior. And so many teams are investing in those mammoth nose tackles, under tackle, that can both pass the rusher and just be so disruptive out there. And conversely, the Vikings don't have that either on their defensive line. So yes, how do you solve all the problems in one draft? Considering everything they have right now, I don't think you can. But when you look at the Lions' success, I think it starts right there. I absolutely think it starts with Frank Ragnow, and yes, they have a great tackle in Sewell too. But it starts with Frank Ragnow and filters out. And I think that's an area that they have to address. But I think defensive line, Judd, is a far more pressing issue right now.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. If Cousins comes back, I think you have to draft. I think you're going to draft a defensive tackle. Now, if Hunter leaves, you might draft an edge, but I'm with you, man. Because like the two things in football that I don't think get talked about enough, unless you've got a guy, interior offensive line and a defensive tackle. And those guys are game havoc wreakers. And
I forgot what game we were watching. It might have been the way Buffalo was running the ball in Kansas City in the first half. And I was, we were watching family. I was like, man, there is nothing more demoralizing in football than when you can't stop the run. Because just like you're helpless. It's like that, then they can do anything. So, and I look across the board, and if you take Daniil out of this equation, which if they bring Cousins back, how does he fit with Jefferson in the contracts? He's going to get a massive deal from someone.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Who's the difference makers on their defensive line right now, other than Daniil?
They don't have one.
And do you have the money in free agency to go find one? You'd hope that they're, which was false hope, but you thought maybe Davenport would show you something in the 1 year audition that he would necessarily. So that was a disaster.
Yep.
Interior, I agree. As much as edge rushes are coveted right now and are getting paid right now, man, you wonder if you shouldn't start inside out and really get you a bona fide big time defensive tackle.
Name me the last time, and I'm not even talking from this past season, Chip. Name me the last time that you watched a Vikings game and came away and said, man, that defensive line, the Vikings, kicked the opponent's butts.
I'm thinking about, and this is, I'm sure there are more before it, but I would go back to the Saints playoff game with Zim moved Daniil inside, and I felt like they dominated that game.
It's a good one.
I mean, we saw it all the time, during the Pat, Kevin, Jared, Ray,
and Linval.
Edwards. And Linval,
he could do it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there have been more before that, but that, I keep thinking about that New Orleans game where they moved Daniil inside, and I'm sure there've been more, but I think it's a glaring problem right now.
So, okay, right now, draft wise, and I'm sure it's changed because it changes for me on like a daily, on a weekly, if not a daily basis. Right now, draft wise, what would you do? 11th pick. Let's say you stand pat. What would you do?
Are you bringing Cousins back?
Let's say yes and no. Let's start by saying yes. Let's say Kirk is back.
I think I still have to go quarterback, Judd. I mean, if they fall in love with the guy, if they fall in love with Penix, if they fall in love with JJ McCarthy, if they fall in love, I don't think they're not, unless they have some magic wand where they're really going to make a big play to try to jump up into Drake May territory. I don't think Jayden Daniels is going to be there at 11 still. Maybe you can move up and somehow get him. I don't know, but if one of those guys are there and Kevin tells you, I absolutely love this guy, he's going to fit for the system. Because I think there's, I thought there were guys last year where Kevin said, you know what? Other people value him, this quarterback, different than me. I don't think he's what we're looking for. If Kevin tells you that, if he says that about Penix or some other quarterback, then you trust him because this is why you hired him. But if he's saying, man, I absolutely, we may not be in this position to draft 11th again next year. The quarterback class might not be as good. As many holes as they have on defense, I think I still draft quarterback, man.
If you do that, though,
I know.
What do you do defensively? And what's the point? What's the point of bringing Kirk back if your defense is going to be just a sieve?
Well, that's it. I mean, that's that. To me, if you bring Kirk back, you're saying we're competitive right now.
Correct.
And with Kirk back, maybe you are, but what is competitive? That you're a fringe playoff team. I wrote about this. We should talk about it. When you look at this division right now, it feels like the Vikings are staring up to me. Mm-hmm. I think the Packers know what they're doing vision wise. Jordan Love is clearly their guy now. They have 5 draft picks in the top 100, so they can fix their areas there. They're the youngest roster. They know what they're doing. I think the Lions' plan makes sense. What they're doing, they got a lot of draft picks in the top 100. They're gonna have to fix their defense. I don't trust that defense at all. Every time it feels like they're sort of hanging by a thread. But they'll improve their secondary.
Yep.
But when you look at the way they're built and the way they're run, the Bears are going to get Caleb Williams, so that could be franchise changing. So this is the hardest discussion because it's like you have ownership that I think is so competitive that likes to win, and Kirk gives you the best chance to do that. But what if you take a real honest assessment of your roster and say, what are we? I don't think you can come away and say, yes, with Kirk, you can be a playoff team, but are you really going to be a legitimate threat with the defensive holes that you have? I just don't know, Judd. I don't see it.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I think it takes capital, but gentlemen, I think you can do both. You can find a quarterback and you can find a defensive player both in the first round. Now, maybe that quarterback or that defensive player is somewhere in the 20s or the last few picks of the first round. But then if you do that, you'll also get an extra year for whoever that first round player is. So I think you can, to use the term, I think you can serve both agendas. You can serve both masters if you really want to. You can be competitive right now and you can still build for the future. Now, eventually, like what they've done with contracts, eventually that bill will come due when you get down the road and you realize you don't have nearly as many draft picks as you would like. But if there was ever a draft to do that, I think you would do it in this draft, knowing how many quarterbacks are available. And in theory, it's a fairly deep draft defensively, at least when it comes to tackles and edge rushers as well. So I think you could do them both in one round, but you have to be willing to part with capital and future capital.
And that's the tricky slope there or a slippery slope there because I feel like they have so many needs to start giving up on draft picks to move up or whatever. Like I look at it right now, defensive line across the board. they have to readdress the cornerback situation, I think,
That's
because
a problem.
they missed on.
Yes.
So Kwesi thought he was fixing a problem with the 2022 draft.
Right.
Because there's been such a lack of production from those, was it five defensive guys he took in the top 6 picks, or 4 or 5? Because there's been such a lack of development and production, it's almost like you have to readdress it now, right?
Oh yes, Cassine looks like a bust. Booth they tried to play and then yanked him out, right? Evans I think can play, but he got benched in the last 2 games.
Twice.
So I'm not sure about that. So no, you're exactly right. Now
Asama.
Yeah.
Asamoah,
Now he had surgery, and now we're hearing he was hurt because he did get hurt in training camp, but I don't know that I trust that completely.
Yeah.
But I think there's a quarterback discussion here off of what Ross said, and we talked about this with Phil and Declan today on Purple Daily as well. And it's this. Don't get lulled into believing just because a quarterback draft might be deep with quarterbacks that all of those guys are going to pan out. And that's the Ponder draft.
That's it.
Gabbert, Locker, Ponder. You know, the one guy that was good? Cam Newton, who was the first pick in that draft. But Chipper, we bought in, you just take a quarterback because everyone's going to get a quarterback now. So, I think there's a big difference potentially between Williams, May, and Daniels and the rest of this group of, just take one of those guys.
Well, that's it. And that's where you have to lean heavily on K.O.C. and trust his evaluation. And again, I think there were quarterbacks last year that went in the first round that he probably said, you know what? I just don't see it. I don't see my system, what I'm looking for. So this is a big part of why you hired him to be your head coach, to solve this issue and to be able to figure out who he thinks can be the franchise guy. And so, again, that's why I go back to, if he says, another team may love, let's throw out a name, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy. And Kevin may come to him and say, you know what? Not for us. I just don't see. He may be great in their system.
Will Levis.
Not for Will Levis. Yeah.
Same thing.
He's the one I'm talking about.
I think that's my larger point, though. If you're not going to let him or trust him to identify a quarterback, 1, when are you? And 2, if you're not going to let him do that, why is Kevin O'Connell even here? Because I think that's a part of why he's here.
No, I think, I think they're going to trust him, but it's just that, Caleb Williams and Drake May are going to go 1-2 in it for everybody.
Agreed.
Right? I think Jayden Daniels is going to be a top, 6. I think everybody agrees on those. There may be some difference of opinions on everyone else, like Judd's saying, and so where do they fall on that? But if he falls in love with one of those guys that's there at 11, or they can move up and possibly get Daniels, I don't know how high you're going to have to go him. Then to me, it's just, go do it. Spend all your draft on defense after that, and
right.
And here's the question though: is would they be willing, if he falls in love with a guy, would he be willing to part ways with Kirk?
If he won't, then there's something wrong. Like if he's in love with a guy and says, I can develop this guy, but I can't let go of Kirk, Chip, I think we got a problem then. Because like he was not brought here to be wed to a guy who's going to be 36 in August. Correct. So that's a whole different story. But if he also says, and I think that this is what you were saying, and I agree with it. If he also says, you know what, there's 3 quarterbacks in this draft that I love. And after that, I don't quite frankly, JJ McCarthy or Penix, because, and God knows how his physicals are going to turn out. Kevin O'Connell could say, I don't want to be associated with these guys.
Then you don't do it. Then you trust him and say, you know what, we're going defense and we'll figure it out next year.
Yep.
And we'll try to sign Kirk back or
a
Bridge or whatever. Because what you don't want to do is be on the fence about a guy and just say, well, we're going to have to answer this some point. Maybe this guy, they absolutely have to be in love and confident that this is the guy.
Well, and back to your point about the Wilfs, because we all agree they love being competitive. Their theory on life is get in the tournament and who knows, which Correct. I disagree with a lot. Like, yes, there have been teams that have done that, but that's not the norm. And when I watch these current playoff teams, I see traits that the Vikings simply lack. But to your point about that, if I'm Kwesi and I'm Kevin O'Connell, and I'm talking privately, here's my thought process. They're going to be going into year 3 of 4-year contracts. They can get 5 years. They each got 4 years. I would rather tell the Wilfs, we love this quarterback and we're going to do everything we can. Let's say Jayden Daniels. We're going to do everything we can to get him. And you know what? That might mean that 2024 is not silky smooth, but our future is going to be bright. I'd prefer that than to haphazardly run this thing back with Kirk and be like, well, we can maybe make the playoffs, and then it turns into 2023 again. And now I think you are probably in huge trouble.
Yeah.
Because what's the hope to sell?
It definitely would buy you time, because I don't know if you get an automatic reset, but it would buy you time. And I do wonder, I would love to talk to the Wills, and I don't know if they'd share it publicly, but I wonder if there's anything about the NFL with what San Francisco's done with Brock Purdy, or when you see CJ Stroud, if there's anything thinking, man, these teams have done it. Now they have great rosters, particularly the 49ers that surrounded him but we just have this assumption that, and it's, probably for most cases it's right. If you turn it over to rookie or young guy, they're going to struggle, and it's going to be, you're going to have a tough year. Well, and I know CJ Stroud's special, but how would you like to be with that organization right now? Seeing the way he performed and feel like you have your guy and you can build around him. So, yes, the Wilfs, we know they're fans. We know they want to be competitive, and that was the marching orders or the edict that Mark Wilf said the day he fired Zim and Spielman. I think what he say? I see a super competitive roster or something like that was the term. But it doesn't mean you can't be with a younger quarterback super competitive.
Absolutely not.
As long as you got the right infrastructure and personnel around him.
Yeah, that's the thing is you've got to build the team around that guy. Like, you can't be the quarterback can't do things alone. But this gets back to our conversation about the guards and center. Like, guess what? Jared Goff is helped a lot by the fact that his line can kick some butt.
Yes. Yeah.
And we really appreciate that.
And they went out and they drafted a really great tight end and a really dynamic, explosive running back, and you fit them into there. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you're asking Jared Goff to do it by himself with a terrible line, it's not going to look like this. Correct. And that's for most quarterbacks. Now, Mahomes might get you to a Super Bowl with a terrible line, but most guys are going to need the right people around him. So it is it's a sticky situation for them, and I would love to know how they talk about their roster internally and where they're at.
Which one? Who? The Wilfs or the actual football operations department?
Well, you would hope that they could have those conversations with the Wilfs, right? That you say, listen, this roster, our defense, thank goodness for the coordinator who could cover up a lot of the problems we have personnel-wise. But I wrote this column at the beginning of the year, Judd. Other than Daniel, who is a foundation, cornerstone defensive player on this roster in the same way that JJ is, Hawkinson is, Brian O'Neill is, Darisaw is on offense? Yeah. There's not one.
Right now? No, because Harrison Smith might be retiring, and he's not that guy now. He used to be that guy.
They don't have
he's
one.
Not now. Yeah, and I mean, that's yes. Brian Flores, for the most part, worked miracles, and we know that. And they've got to get those guys. And so here's the problem with the conversation, though, with the Wilfs now. When Kwesi got the job, it would have been a very simple discussion. Hey, I got to do X, Y, and Z. We got to have some drafts. This roster has eroded, blah, 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 blah. Now the problem is this. You sit down now, that 2022 draft, which I don't care if the scouts were different or not, that's looking you right in the face, and that's you. That's on you. So can you say, hey, you know what? I traded back in the first round because I got real cute, and I blew it. Then in the second round, I blew it again. And then on Asamoah, blew that too. Like, that's the conversation. Like, can you how long can you tell them that?
And that's the thing. It's like, when that draft has been such a disaster for him in terms of replenishing this competitive rebuild. Well, when you're basing your competitive rebuild on rebuilding with young players that you draft, and then you miss on a draft, you got a major problem here. So that's the other thing. I mean, he can't miss on this draft because you can't have 2 and 3 years where, and
You know what
even,
that pressure is though? Like that's the like I agree with you, but the pressure of, well, you screwed up 22, so you can't miss this draft. And then Kevin's gonna, I just think that these guys, if they're trying to win immediately and keep Kirk, I think they've painted themselves into such a huge corner.
So Judd, what would you do at 11 if they don't keep Kirk? Then you got to draft a quarterback, right?
Agreed.
If they keep him, are you taking defensive tackle or edge rusher?
Depends if they don't keep Kirk and they re-sign Hunter, I'm going DT for sure. I'm going defensive tackle for sure. And I would expect that they're going to keep Kirk or Hunter, probably not both. So, but I would far prefer to have a situation though, if they don't keep Kirk, where I would at least have the conversation about, can we trade up? And it would cost them a lot, but can we trade up to get, if Jayden Daniels truly is, like, if there's a hat trick of greatness potentially and everybody else is in the pot, I would far prefer to take my shot at Jayden Daniels.
Yes. Yeah, I would. And, I don't know what it would take, or I'm sure a lot. But if that's an option, then I think you have to do it. I mean, I love watching him play, and I think that mobility, the running component to it,
and it's that's such a nice thing to have. Like, I watched these games. I'm sorry, but that buys you so much grace with that mobility.
Well, it's funny when you watch that Chiefs Bills game, and you watch the way Mahomes and Josh Allen used their feet to just, I mean, that thing was beautiful. Watching those two just trade big plays. So yeah, if you can get that and add it, the quarterback that has that skill set. So I would not want to, I mean, this is a trend, and that's why I asked Kwesi about the end of the thing. It's like, what he does this offseason is going to impact this organization for 5, 7, 9, 10 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'll beat the proverbial dead horse here, boys. I think it's malpractice if you don't come out of this draft with a quarterback. I mean, what's the worst that happens? You get the wrong guy and you do it again in 3 or 4 years. I truly don't understand. And I get it. Like, I'm not saying wait till 22 and move back up for Bo Nix. If you like him, that's a different story. I'm not saying just take a guy to take a guy like they did with Christian Ponder. But if you know a guy that you believe can transform your franchise and you have to move up to 3 or 6 or 8 to get him, then you do it independent of Kirk Cousins coming back or not, because you can't keep kicking this down the road as a franchise. You just can't. It's time.
I agree.
It's time.
If you love a guy, then you do it. But you have to love him. I mean, you have to feel like we're not just doing what they did because they needed a quarterback and they took Ponder. I mean, now maybe they love Ponder too, but they felt like, we knew going in there, they're taking a quarterback no matter what. They had to have one. And so.
And is Kirk going to get 2 years guaranteed? Because if he gets 2 years guaranteed, you might not draft one. Who knows?
I don't think he's signing for anything less than 2 guaranteed. Do you?
I agree with that. But then do you take, look, I agree with Ross, but the reality is this: the Vikings operate in mysterious ways, and they have deluded themselves into, I guarantee you that they think the same thing that the fan base does, which, well, if Kirk stays healthy, they're in the playoffs right now and it's okay. But were you really, like, when you see how the playoffs stack up, are you really going to make a run? My response is no. Last question for you. A year from now, God willing, we're all here and talking. A year from now, will the Vikings regret having passed on Jim Harbaugh, who now has taken the Chargers job?
I think he's a great coach. I think he's going to win there. He wins everywhere. He's, him and Herbert, I think it's going to be a fantastic pairing. Maybe, he's obviously a lot you have to deal with. A lot. He's, just the quirkiness and all that is a lot to. Sometimes I wonder his shelf life, but I tell you what, the guy wins, Judd. He's a flat out good coach. So will they regret it? I don't know, because it didn't go very very long in the interview process. So they probably won't. But do I think he's going to win with the Chargers? Yeah, I think he's going to win.
And I still can't believe he got in trouble for people scouting games. Tell your sport to make scouting games in person legal. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Take your phone and video from the sidelines.
But I mean, you can't scout games because they decided they're a sport that makes billions of dollars. Can't scout. Yeah. Big Ten teams can't scout. It's unbelievable. Chip Scoggins, great stuff.
All right, boys.
We'll talk to you next time. This has been Purple Axis. Have a great one.
See ya.